Good morning, everyone. We really appreciate you all for joining this April 2024 ACAMS Kansas City webinar event. The focus on this of this event will be fraud, real-time detection, not pastime prevention. So my name's Danny Schneider. I am one of the board members of the ACAMS Kansas City chapter. I'm currently sitting here with the team at Unit21. We have Ria, Scott, and Cassie, and they're going to be taking you through their Unit21 platform and just some of the trends and things like that surrounding fraud. We're extremely excited that they agreed to do this with us, and I think you guys are going to have a really good webinar, a lot of really good information. So with that, Ria, go ahead, and if you wouldn't mind going on to the next slide. Going to do a couple housekeeping things here. Please just, like with any ACAMS webinar, all the attendees are muted. Please submit questions through the Q&A button. We will both be addressing these throughout the webinar itself, and we're going to save about 10 minutes at the end for some questions. As a reminder, if you are a member of the chapter and you did sign up with that login, you will get 1 ACAMS credit for participation in today's virtual event. Just a couple of housekeeping things. ACAMS Assembly, which is fintech and crypto related, is June 10th and 11th in Austin, Texas. So if you haven't gotten your tickets and you're looking to go, I would definitely recommend you sign up. It's a great conference down there, perfect weather, great place to be. Another event that is going on in June is the big time ACAMS law enforcement seminar talking about law enforcement training from industry leaders. And an event I am very proud of, something the ACAMS Kansas City chapter has been working very hard on. We are going to have an all-day in-person event in Kansas City. At the Kansas City Convention Center. We're going to have multiple panels. We're going to have regulators. We're going to have fintech executives. We're going to have sponsor bank directors of financial crime and BSA officers, all talking about everything in it, everything with fintech, financial crime, and BAS. So if you haven't signed up yet, please do. We're expecting it to be a big one, so get your tickets early. And kind of also in the same vein of Unit21, they have very graciously, they're going to be hosting a happy hour after that May 9th event, open to anyone who attends the event. So please just RSVP, make sure that they have a good sized venue for the event. And with that, Ria, I will pass it over to you and put myself on mute. And thank you guys so much for being here.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Danny. So wanted to quickly cover the agenda, and then we'll pass it over to my colleague Scott to walk us through high level, what Unit21 does, and how we help our customers move from detection to prevention. So in terms of the agenda, reiterating a little bit of what Danny already mentioned, we'll be covering real-time monitoring, as well as other tools and techniques that we've incorporated to help move from detection of fraud to prevention of fraud, covering not only real-time monitoring, but also our ML and AI initiatives, and in particular, highlighting our approach to generative AI, given all the changes in the landscape over the past 1.5 years. Then we'll leave some time for questions at the end. So in terms of myself, I am a product lead here at Unit21, focusing on our AI ML initiatives, which is why we'll be touching a little bit on that today. Scott, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Great. Thanks, Ria. I'm Scott Bakelin, everybody. I'm a account executive with Unit21, but I do hail from the industry. The last 10 years, I've been in money services, commercial banking, as well as private wealth and fintech. So moving on to the next slide, as Ria and Danny kind of highlighted what we're going to do. So for those of you that do not know Unit21, Unit21 is a fraud AML platform, and our basic mission is that we want to stop bad actors and deliver justice and safety to the world. And as you see on the slide, there are many institutions that have partnered with us in that fight, right? So when Unit21, we look at it, we look at problems, we look at solutions, we look at that landscape that Ria is going to talk about further later on, and we really like to dive into it. So as we go into the next slide, we really understand that fraud, we're going to talk about the F word, not that F word, but fraud. And what's really interesting is fraud is happening. Now, depending on your institution, depending on your size, scope, your product, fraud is always going to be a complex issue. Some of you look at fraud in your institution as a Bob Ross, a very happy painting, happy trees, a beautiful lake. Other institutions on this call they look at fraud as the dark forest of the Middle Earth. However, what Unit 21 has been seeing, and as we talk with industry leaders, as we talk with thought leadership, we know fraud is on the rise. Institutions are saying fraud is on the rise. We're seeing that. And what happens on one end of the spectrum, you have a criminal. That criminal is hacking. That criminal is stealing information. Then they monetize that information through fraud. That fraud is happening. That fraud is happening today. That fraud is happening in your institution. Now, what happens at your institution? How does that fraud affect your members? And the member is in the center of this Venn diagram, because as it pulls into focus, you start understanding, based on your institution, based on that landscape, what does your fraud problem look like? How do you manage it? How do you respond to it? How do you react to it? Are you doing live alerting? Are you doing same day alerting? Are you doing next day batching? So what's really interesting about fraud is that while the regulatory landscape is pretty set, right? FinCEN has said X, Y, and Z. These are your red flags. There's manuals. There's guidelines. What's really interesting when it comes to fraud is that it's constantly changing. It's constantly moving. So it's when we start talking to institutions and other banks and partners, and we say, well, what's your response? I'm like, gosh, how do we take fraud and apply it to regulation? Fraud is a gooey mess, and regulations are very clean, very, 48 pages long, 78, lawyers put it all together. But how do we then take that gooey mess and put it into a policy? How do we take that gooey mess and put it into an actual flow and procedure? So it really becomes a unique challenge across the board. And we go to the next slide, we start really seeing kind of how does Unit 20 fit into that? Well, Unit 21 fits into that because, again, we're a fraud AML platform. We're a stateless platform, meaning that we can tie into your flow. And how does Unit 21 do that? Well, we've been supporting customers with look at the numbers. The numbers are absolutely phenomenal. We're looking at nearly 4 billion events monitored, real-time monitored. We're looking at 4 billion events. We've looked at $2.7 trillion worth of transaction value, 2.7 trillion, 4.3 billion in fraud detection, and we're getting better at it, right? So other interesting things that Unit 21 is able to do, we have our fraud consortium. We have 35 million records. Remember the Flintstone commercial from back in the day? I'm not going to date anybody, but back in the day, 10 million strong and growing. Our fraud consortium has 35 million records in it and growing. We have 42 partners in that consortium. So we're not just saying that we're a consortium. We're taking the fight of fraud to the front lines, and we're enabling your respective teams, your respective institutions, giving them more ability to piece it all together. The more signals you have, the better decisions you guys can make. The more understanding of your data that you see, the better decisions you can make. So as we continue on, how does Unit 21 look at that? Unit 21 looks at that in a real easy, well, we say easy. Fraud is never easy. It's always complex. And there's putting policy and procedures and flows together is a very challenging thing. But we look at this ability of how do you go from a reactive fraud program to a proactive active fraud program, right? How do you use it, right? And one of the biggest things is really understanding your flow, understanding your institution's risk appetite. Again, everybody looks at fraud differently. Based on that, how does your viewpoint, that kaleidoscope, how does that landscape look for your institution, right? Is it a product? Is it just a demographic? Is it an account? So for Unit 21, we look at it as everybody has transactional data. Everybody has some KYC data. Now, you may have 5 or 6 different KYC providers. You may have 5 or 6 different transactions. You may have stuff coming from a core system. You may have stuff coming from an internal system. All that pulls together. We're able to pull that together. We also add in our fraud consortium or our fraud DAO. You'll hear that in 2 different terms. Well, we piece all that together, and we're able to take in all that data, help you understand it, help you sort it, and we're able to piece it in together. And what Rhea is going to talk about here in a few minutes is really kind of how do we take into that transaction monitor? How do we take your data, help you normalize it, move that through to real-time monitoring so you can actually take actions, right? We have a very dynamic rules model, what we call validation, but we have a rules engine that allows you, the analyst, the compliance professional, the fraud operations individuals, the ability to develop your own rules. We have out-of-the-box rules, but you can also develop your own rules. You can test those rules. You can see how they would work against your current data, historical data, and it's all on an audit trail. So for those auditors on the line, everything is tracked seamlessly through Unit21. We also, in Unit21, our platform allows a feature of graph-based analysis, right? So remember the big thing, social analysis, nodal analysis, link analysis. We provide that. So when you're going through your investigation and you're seeing this, you're able to actually see the shared accounts, the shared attributes. Again, one door, many keys. So as we're moving this transactional data through, as we're putting all these rules through, your team now is able to really see and get a full picture of the risk that's presented to your institution. In addition to that, the platform also is able to do completely case management. We help with automation. We help with moving your processes and flows along, and to the point of customized workflows. And I say customized workflows, and I know there's people on the line that are like, well, customized means you're going to charge me for every single button. Absolutely not the case. Unit21 is a fully customizable workflow. If you have 48 steps, you can have 48 buttons. You want 3 steps, you can get 3 steps. So what's really interesting is as Unit21 pulls all that together, as the previous slide kind of highlighted, you really start seeing the sheer amount of volume and numbers that Unit21 is doing, right? So as we partner with our clients, customers, and as we go out into the space and we speak and we meet and we get to have these kind of webinars, we really get excited because for us, we understand there's a concern. For us, we see that we know that you have a potential problem, and we love to try to solve for it. We love to dig back into it, really understand, like, well, what's the problem? You're saying that, well, we have this type of payment fraud. Well, is that the issue, or is there something else going on downstream? And we're able to work together, partner, and walk along your journey to really piece it together. And with that piece, now I'm going to hand it over to Ria. And Ria is going to really start kind of showing you some of the amazing features that Unit21, the platform, brings that really takes these slides and brings them to life. Ria?
Awesome. Thanks so much, Scott. That was a great introduction. So excited to chat through some of our features a little bit more in depth and then do a live demo with the group here as well. So to start, we'll be talking a little bit about real-time monitoring, which is the ability to basically flag transactions or flag actions in real time. The reason we've invested in real-time monitoring is because we truly believe that the payment ecosystem is moving to be faster and faster, irrespective of actually whatever rail customers are using. For example, even for ACH payments, we're seeing more and more of our customers want to allow their users instant access to funds, even if they choose to use ACH to fund their accounts. We think the journey to real-time payments is going to happen no matter what, and we should help our customers get ahead of that and really be front runners in getting their customers or giving their customers the very best experience. In addition, as I'm sure the group here knows, FedNow was released not too long ago, and we think RTP payments and FedNow payments are really going to push this to be faster over the next couple of years, so that the number of real-time transactions that we're seeing goes from about 120 billion now to 3 or 4 times that in just a couple more years. So in terms of what our solution looks like, not to harp too much on what Scott already mentioned, but it's extremely flexible, where we allow customers to create rules on any event they can. So events can be something like logins into your application, password changes, beneficiary changes. They can also be things like, adding a certain tag to their profile, or using a certain email address or email domain when they're signing up. That can be kind of an action. You can also automatically flag, obviously, transactions. So that would be, card transactions, P2P payments, RTP payments, etc. And what you can do with our real-time monitoring system is create rules on these actions or transactions, immediately screen those actions or transactions, get a response in within 250 milliseconds, and then based on that, determine what you want your customer to be able to do. So in some cases, we see our customers, automatically rejecting a certain payment if the person is maybe transacting to or from a high-risk jurisdiction. We also see people start to put some holds on if they're seeing, for example, a change in the beneficiary. Maybe they put a hold on how much money can be transferred out of that account just for the next, couple of hours in case there's an ATO attack being done on their customer. In addition, you can also flag alerts. So another option is, if you choose to hold something, maybe hold a transaction, you can then generate an alert so that when a person is on the other end, working the alert, they're able to determine whether or not to then let that transaction through or block it. So there's a lot of flexibility, both in terms of, the rules that you can create, the data points that you can use in those rules, but also how you choose to take action on those rules, whether it's automatic, with a person in between, with an RFI then being sent to the customer to get additional information to run additional rules on, or something else entirely. Because we very strongly believe in giving power to our customers, we allow customers, with the right permissions, of course, to write, test, and deploy these real-time rules in minutes. So without any engineering support, as Scott mentioned, you can use our out-of-the-box rules, or you can create your own rules. You can validate them on historical data to make sure that we would catch the right information, that we're not, adding too many blocks or being too lax, and then deploy that rule in production without even, speaking to a single engineer on your side or on our side of the system. In addition, this may be obvious, but we also allow you to list good customers. So, suppose you have Scott, for example, traveling abroad to a high-risk jurisdiction and now trying to make an ACH payment. It's possible that Scott then called in and let you know to let that payment through, and you then don't want to bother him for the next 7 days. That is very straightforward to do. We always make sure that that our customers are able to provide their users with the best possible experience, and that means allowing us to allow list our customers' users. And also specific relationships between our customers' users, because maybe Scott is allowed to, give $10,000 a month to some specific person, but not to me. So that can be, another thing that you can allow list in Unit21.
So Ria, before you go on, we have a question. You
okay.
mentioned account takeover fraud. So how does Unit21 with the rules? The question is identify synthetic IDs in real time. So can you kind of talk into that behavioral, how we can build dynamic rules to pick up that behavioral information?
Yeah, definitely. So from what I understand, synthetic ID is basically connecting both real customer data and unreal customer data to create this new identity that becomes difficult to catch. Generally, we hope that those synthetic IDs are caught actually during the onboarding process itself, just because it has more to do with identity than it has to do with a certain transaction or action being taken. But once a synthetic ID is, onto a platform, there are a couple of things that we can do to try to catch specifically account takeover. So suppose somebody created a synthetic ID and then tried to log into an actual person's account with the same last name, but maybe a different first name. Maybe it's Joe and Joey, something like that. There are a couple of things we can do in that case. One is flag when there is, a new device ID or a new IP address being used. So that would be flagging an action event that hasn't been seen before. So that's one thing that we can do to, very easily, not easily, but to quickly catch account takeover fraud. If somebody is now logging in from a new IP address, maybe you then want to put a hold on the amount of money that they can transfer out until you're able to get more information. Or maybe you want to do two-factor authentication, send a text or send an email and make sure that person actually confirms that they are who they are to be able to let them through. So I think generally it's, newly seen where IP addresses, devices, locations, things like that haven't been seen before. Would be kind of the number one thing that we suggest customers do. Other things that you can do can be a little bit more behavioral. You can see if the person is trying to send out more money than they have in the past. So suppose, again, Scott is transferring $150 every week to his daughter. Suddenly he's trying to transfer $1,500 to his daughter. We don't know exactly what might be going on, but we can flag that there's a historical deviation and then make sure that an agent actually looks at that before the transaction is allowed to go through. Maybe we put a hold on it. So those are a couple of examples of ways that we're able to catch when someone's behavior looks odd, or when someone is maybe conducting transactions from a place or from a device that we haven't seen before. So that's how I'd answer that question. But any follow-up questions based on what I've said so far?
Not yet, Ria. So with that being said, is there the ability with Unit21 to say, you indicated behavioral, device intelligence, things like that. Is there any limit to what we can do with the rules? If we have, let's say we have our institution, man, we are getting hit with account takeovers. We just have a lot of synthetics, and our defenses just aren't up to par. So is there a limit to, or is the sky the limit with Unit21 rules? Can I come up with every crazy possibility and possible conditions between hour A and hour B, and I guarantee you that was an extra zero? That was a thumb mistake to give my daughter that much money. That's right off the bat.
Yeah, you can definitely do that. So that's something we prioritize at Unit21, which is, again, providing a lot of flexibility to our customers, because we know a lot of, historical vendors in the space. They, ask their customers to use a specific schema and only use specific data points. So one of our kind of value propositions is that we are very flexible. We are very thorough. We'll use any data that you give to us, whether it's, the color of, your credit card, or the logo that you've used, or something else like the type of transaction or the amount of the transaction. So you're allowed to use all both custom and standard data in rules. You can connect them in different ways using and conditions, or conditions, grouping. You can use, allow listing. You can also create lists to just say, this is a list of known bad devices or known bad IPs. Make sure if anybody tries to log in from one of those or makes a transaction from one of those, we immediately block that. So there's a lot of flexibility. And I think what we really pride ourselves on is we never say no to, or there is no single data point that cannot be used in a rule. Every single data point that you have available to you can be used in Unit21's rules.
And again, we don't have to be a data analyst or a data scientist to understand that. So I don't need to be able to write 38 lines of code and figure out and get the syntax error code 404. I can do this on my own inside the system.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll show you what that looks like and how easy it is. It's kind of like Mad Libs. So should be very straightforward for anybody to use. All
right, let's get into it, Ria.
Awesome. Okay, I think, great. It is demo time, so I'll go straight into the tab that I have ready for this. Are you able to see the models tab now on my screen?
Yes, we are.
Perfect. Okay. So in terms of creating real-time rules, they're very similar to creating other types of rules in Unit21. You basically go onto the detection models page, which is where all of your models live, whether they're just general rules or real-time rules, or even machine learning models. You can create a new rule from here. As Scott has mentioned, we have some out-of-the-box rules. We call those scenario models. So you can see a bunch of them over here. We also have a very complex rule builder for more difficult rules or more complex rules that you might want to create. And then we have the ability to create real-time rules. So rules that run in under 250 milliseconds rather than every 5 minutes or 10 minutes. So when you're creating a real-time rule, you can choose to flag a transaction or an action. I'll start by flagging a transaction, and I'll talk about that that rule that we just mentioned, where we're maybe flagging authorized push payment fraud, or like ATO. I'll say authorized push payment fraud for now. And then we'll flag when a customer's transactions look anomalous based on historical transactions. And you can add some tags if you'd like, but this is just so that when you're looking at this later, you know exactly why you created the rule and what it's flagging. Then, like I mentioned, we have this Mad Libs rule builder. So you can flag all transactions, or you can flag transactions of a certain type. I'll just flag all transactions for now. And then you can open up this field to look at all of the options that you have to be able to use in this rule. To start, I'll look at amount. And then because I chose amount, which is an integer, we'll give you operators that kind of match with that. So here we'll say, okay, when amount is greater than maybe 150% of the average amount over the last 30 days. So I did that kind of fast, but as you can tell, you kind of get additional options based on what you've chosen. That makes sense based on what you've chosen, to be able to, fill out a full sentence of what you're trying to flag. So this would be, if Scott is trying to give his daughter, I'm going to say 500%. So significantly more money than he normally does. Then we want to make sure that we flag that because it's very anomalous and it might indicate ATO or fat fingering or something else entirely. But you can also add additional conditions via either and connectors or connectors. So another thing I've mentioned is, IP address. So I'll look up IP address. Oops. Okay. And because IP address is a string field, we'll give you different operators that make sense for a string field. So I'll say IP address is in, and then I'll select a match list, which is basically just a list of strings that you have available to you, whether those are IP addresses or device IDs or something else entirely. So I'll say IP address is in the high-risk jurisdictions list or high-risk countries list. So not only is Scott sending a lot of money, but his IP address also seems to be in a high-risk country. I'm not sure if he's traveling or something else is happening, but definitely want to flag this. I'll just show another thing that you can do. You can also add a group. So I can say, this, or, and then have two other conditions over here. But I'll just delete this for now to keep this simple. But as you can tell, very easy to build additional conditions, very flexible. I'll change this back to and maybe take this out too. But then you can click next, and it looks like the time range for validation here is a little large. But as we mentioned, as Scott has mentioned, you can then validate this real-time rule on historical data to see what would have been flagged. Or you can choose to just activate the rule with or without triggering an alert. You would not trigger alert if you wanted to just automatically take action. So you would get the response in under 250 milliseconds and decide, okay, I do want to let this through, or I want to block this, or I want to hold this until someone on our side is able to take a look. But you could also trigger an alert pretty easily. Right now, everything goes into the default queue, but in the short term, we'll be adding the ability to trigger these real-time alerts in different queues. But for now, I'm just going to activate the rule and show you what that looks like. So you'll see, a summary of the rule content, the exact, sentence that we've built, and then any triggered alerts if those exist. I also just pulled up some additional rules that I created in advance, just to be able to show them quickly. But here we have a high-risk countries rule where we're flagging actions, specifically logins. Let me duplicate this. So in here, you want to flag actions of type login when the address is in maybe a high-risk country list. So if somebody tries to log in from a country that you have on a high-risk jurisdictions or high-risk country list, you could also make this more targeted. You could also, see if somebody's logging in from a zip code that maybe is on a high-risk list for you. You can easily create this rule, click next, validate it if you'd like, activate it if you'd like, and then immediately have it in production. Did we get a question? I think I just saw something, but
we sure did, Ria.
Okay.
This is where the question's coming in is, if our AI machine learning models, are we utilizing an ensemble model or boosting and bagging or supervised learning or a combination of different logs? How are we piecing that together?
Great question. So we are primarily using our, what's it called? Random forest model. So it's a supervised model. That's primarily the type of machine learning model that we choose to use.
Yeah, and I think another thing, just to kind of sit here real quick, Ria, to let everybody, all the the attendees kind of take a look at this screen, is really how fast Ria is a wizard with our product, by the way, everybody. So she did that extremely fast, but she did that in less than 2 minutes. So a brand new person walking in, you really just kind of got to think through your question of what am I trying to identify? And as Ria mentioned earlier, everybody, the amount of data that you have, the more data that you send us, the more data that we can look at. We have the ability, Unit21's platform is so agnostic and so flexible that we can piece together the and I'm going to say crazy, the craziest scenarios that you guys, anybody on this line could come up with. I guarantee it, we could come up with a rule to capture it. So again, just to show everybody how, and this is a guy, as a guy from the industry, I get super excited with the ability to build my own rules, right? I'm no longer relying on another team. I'm no longer relying on questioning their methodology. I'm seeing it, I'm logging it, I can test it, I can validate it, and then I can tweak it, which is even better, because let's say the initial was too broad. RIA has shown that you can add additional conditions. You can change it and bring it back in and really tighten and find that particular concern for that, either A, your institution, B, a new product that your institution is releasing, or a type of fraud that is either currently taking effect or not taking effect. And again, as RIA is bouncing through this demo, it almost seems overwhelming, but you start at step 1, you go to step 2, you heard some conditions and parameters there. So we're not doing calculus or statistics, but we got to have fun with polynomials, inner outer first, right? So we have to do a little bit of algebra there, but it's pretty much a self-explanatory. We can help you build. And by the way, with Unit21, you're not alone. We have a fantastic team of CSMs and implementation managers that absolutely live to help our clients and customers build and talk about rules. Back to you, Ria.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I tried to show a little bit of the flexibility while you were, expressing how easy it is to work with our rules. I know we're getting, far on time. So I'm going to maybe go back to the presentation and get into some of our ML AI features for now. But at the end, if there are any questions on, especially how the alerts look or how the transactions look after real-time rules are run on them, that's what I was going to show next. But for now, I will go right into AI and ML. So Unit21's AI principles are as listed here. I think we care a lot about our customers, and kind of these principles come out of that because we want to make sure that we're not coming from, an engineering like Silicon Valley place, but instead coming from a place that is really trying to understand, especially our banking and credit union customers, what they need, and then working with them to give them that so that they can not only have answers internally, around questions that arise when using AI ML features, but also have answers for regulators. So there are a couple of things that we have here that I'd like to touch on. One is, or a couple of these are, pretty high level things we've already covered, but we really pride ourselves in our flexibility and on making sure that we have unique ML models for our unique customers. We don't expect really one model to work for all of our customers, though we sometimes do look to see if there are certain features that are performing well for one customer. That might mean they would also perform well for another customer. But we make sure that we generally have, individual ML models for our customers because we believe that those lead to better results. But the place where we really shine, I think, is transparency and making sure that our solutions are not black boxes, but instead white boxes. We really make sure that we design for trust and clarity because that's what our customers have asked for. We never just give a score. We give a score and we give reasons for that score. We explain, or we share the features that we use in the model. We talk through how we remove features, how often we retrain the model, the data that goes into the model, so forth and so on. And that isn't always the easiest thing to be able to do because, for those who know a lot about the machine learning space, understanding why a machine learning model has outputted what it has is its own very large research area. But we've spent considerable time at Unit21 trying to figure out, what's the best thing we can do to help our customers and help regulators understand where, scores are coming from so that it doesn't feel as much of a black box and instead feels like, okay, we're working together to try to, one, build the best possible solution to stop fraud, but two, make sure that we're not working off of bias and make sure that we're not kind of working blindly off of these scores that are being outputted. And then the last thing, which I think also kind of fits really well with our customers' needs, is making sure that we always have kind of a human in the loop. We try to make sure whenever we're looking to automate a certain process or augment it, that we go, level by level. So to start, we might first, give a score and give reasons for that score. Next, we might give a score, give reasons for that score, and also say this is the suggested next action. Third, we might say, okay, if the score is, if we're 90% certain of the score, would you like us to just take the suggested action? So forth and so on. So we make sure there are a lot of checks and balances. And if customers are not comfortable with any automatic action being taken, that's never something that's, pushed on them, because we know a lot of our customers want to make sure there's always a human in the loop, no matter what happens. That's another thing we keep, really top of mind for us, given what we've heard from our customers so far. But with that, I will go into a couple of our features. So at a really high level, I want to differentiate quickly between machine learning and artificial intelligence. So machine learning and the rise of machine learning has really been over the past maybe 10 to 15 years, where you're able to use training data, whether that's alerts that have led to true positives, transactions that have been reversed, ACHs that have been reversed, or credit card charges that have led to chargebacks, so forth and so on, plus features, which are things like, okay, how long is the email address? How long ago did the person register? What is their daily spend limit? What does that look like? Those are all the features. So we take the training data, we take the features, we train a machine learning model, and we train it to basically predict based on historical information. When new transactions come in or new people come in, can you look at all of these different features and see how likely they are to then lead to a true positive alert, or then lead to a credit card chargeback, or then lead to an ACH reversal. So this has really been what has led to kind of the rise of scores in the fraud space over the past 10 to 15 years. And we have those at Unit21 as well. We have ACH risk scores that predict how likely an ACH is to be reversed. And we have alert scores that are meant to predict how likely an alert is to lead to a case or a SAR. And that's, again, based on advances that have happened, a decade plus ago. But what I want to focus today's talk on is actually on artificial intelligence, because as I'm sure the group here is well aware, there have been major strides in the field of artificial intelligence over the past year or year and a half. And we really believe that if we leverage those strides, we can make a significant impact on our customers, both in the fraud and in the compliance space. So that's what I'm going to focus on actually for today. And with that, I will get right into the first solution. So the first feature we have is something called AI Copilot that basically automatically generates a narrative for alert scores, or automatically generates kind of a narrative on alerts to direct analysts to the most pertinent information that can then help them catch bad activity. What we are using our AI Copilot for is to first just direct analysts to the most important information on each alert, whether that's how long ago the customer registered, their social media profile, their historical transactions, their transactions over the past day or a year ago, things like that. And then we'll also suggest a disposition based on that. But this is just the beginning in the level 0 to 5 automation. First, we'll help analysts look at the right information. Then we might actually automatically pull up the information for them and say, hey, this is the narrative we've generated. Based on this, what decision would you like to take? Then the next step would be, okay, based on this, we wrote this narrative. We think you should automatically close this out. Would you be comfortable with us doing that in the future? So forth and so on, kind of helping move from just being a sidekick to analysts to help resolve alerts quicker, but not making too much of an impact, maybe saving them, a minute or so, to really, closing out false positives as quickly as possible so that analysts are spending most of their time on what matters rather than on, looking at a bunch of alerts that are actually just false positives and are wasting their time.
Ria, we have two questions. We have a couple questions
okay.
based on false positives? I think there's a couple. One way to answer, we have a question regarding what is the average false positive rate, and I think that's really two ways to look at that. One, it's really the institution, the institution respectfully deems as the false positive, and two, what kind of data you're sending into the system. And then the other question is, how does our fraud feedback loop tie into that model? So that way it knows to dismiss that alert. So we actually start cleaning up those alerts, start cleaning up those respective cues.
Yeah, these are great questions. So in terms of the false positive rate for the AI Copilot, actually, it's not related to the alerts that are generated. It'll just look at all alerts that are generated. So those should be generated either via a machine learning model like our ACH transaction risk scores, and I can share the true positive rate versus false positive rate for that, or through just our normal rules. So, suppose you have a rule that flags all checks above 5,000. The AI Copilot will just look at all of those alerts. It won't differentiate between false positive or true positive. And to start, it'll just say, hey, this is the important information based on what I can see. What action would you like to take? I think it might be a true positive or a false positive. I'm not sure if that answers the question super well. We also have some numbers in terms of how well our predictions line up with actual customer response. And it's pretty great. It's above 90%. So that means, if our AI Copilot says this is probably a true positive, there's a pretty high likelihood that a customer then tends to take an action on that alert, saying that it's a true positive, either dispositioning the alert itself or moving it to a case or moving it to a SAR. And I think that goes in well into kind of the second half of the question, which is how does our fraud feedback loop, flow into the AI Copilot? So the AI Copilot has an underlying machine learning model. It's actually the alert score model that helps it predict how likely an alert is to be a true positive or a false positive. And every time you work an alert, that becomes additional data for the model. So suppose, on Monday you work 10 alerts, on Tuesday you work 50 alerts, then on Wednesday, our AI Copilot now has those 60 more alerts to use as input into understanding, whether an alert should be a true positive or a false positive. That's kind of like the closed loop feedback loop that we have for the model underneath the AI Copilot. But one thing I'll flag is that we are looking to move a little bit away from ML towards generative AI and like artificial intelligence, where the AI Copilot is more like an AI agent. So like suppose if you're training kind of like a level 1 fraud analyst or something like that, you might see them work certain alerts and see them make mistakes and actually just like tell them via words, like this looks wrong, this is why this is wrong. Make sure you take that into account for future alerts that you work. This is further down the line, as we move from level 0 to level 5 automation, but what we foresee is the relationship to be more like human almost, where you're kind of a manager and you're teaching this AI agent, this AI like fraud analyst or compliance analyst, exactly how to resolve alerts and when it makes mistakes, why it's made mistakes, and to maybe double check its work with other AI analysts. So yeah, definitely very, very forward thinking, very, very far away for now. But that's the direction that we're moving in. Does that answer the questions? Any follow-ups or anything you would add, Scott?
No follow-ups. And I just get excited about that because I think a lot of people on the call, every institution, no matter where you've been, the training of new folks, training on new process, new systems, it's so time consuming. So just seeing that's where Unit21 is moving towards, to your point again. So the one question just popped up is, will the AI agent be the first line of defense? I think that's an interesting way to look at that. It could very well could be, because you got to think of how you're going to leverage. I think Rhea and I will ping pong this answer, but there's two ways to look at it. One, from a process flow, what is your current setup? Like, how does your lines of defense set up today? Are you, then two, where are you, how do you want to kind of piece that? To me, it's kind of a, yes, it can be based on your respective institution flow. What are your thoughts there, Rhea?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think when we talk to customers about this, there are two things. There's one, what is AI capable of right now? And there's two, what are our customers comfortable with right now? And I will say right now, it seems like both things point towards the AI agents working false positives and escalating potential true positives. Because As I'm sure everyone here is aware, true positives take more time to work. They take more understanding to work, more expertise. And so at least to start, we see these AI agents instead serving really just as, like cleanup machines, where no matter how well your rules work or how well your machine learning model works, there will be false positives. One option is to, tighten up your rules, tighten up your machine learning model, but there's going to be diminishing returns. The second option is, okay, let's start to train these AI agents to start to clean up these low-level alerts, get them to be pretty quote unquote competent, and then start to move them up the line. So maybe, first they start to escalate everything that seems like it could be a true positive. Maybe then they start to escalate only 90% and try to work 10% themselves. But that's the direction we are looking to go in, kind of low risk to high risk, because it does feel to me, just my gut reaction is that if you start with the AI agent being the first line of defense, that's very high risk. And that doesn't give you or the agent a lot of room to fail and to learn. And so my initial reaction is, at least to start, that's probably not where we would suggest our customers to start with. But I could be wrong too.
I think you're right, Ria. It's really exciting. Like I've been in institutions where we were part of the live application flow. So if something broke in the application flow, the poor team would be inundated with alerts, and the whole weekend would be spent clearing false positive alerts, and everybody adding a manual note, cleared for risk, or bug on such and such date. So just the idea that Unit21 again is thinking about how can we augment that, piece that together, and actually create a virtual team that actually lives in the system, is living and feeding and learning off your institution's data is just, to me, it's just mind-blowing. I think that's so cutting. That's so cool.
Awesome. I love your enthusiasm. I also think it's so cool.
That's why we're here at Unit21. We see, again, as we said earlier, we want to partner with you. We want to solve your problem, because there's Bree and I and Cassie are just 3 of the 100+ people that work at Unit21 that we all are like this, by the way. We all get excited about trying to figure out problems and like, man, what if we can do this? And it's, you should see our roadmap, everybody. It's flipping amazing.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Scott. I love the enthusiasm. I want to make sure I actually get to show this too. Obviously, we're talking a little bit about future state, what's the vision, where we're going. But definitely want to show what we have right now too. So I'll breeze through the rest of this maybe in the next 2 or 3 minutes and try to then leave some time for questions. Or maybe I'll go 5 minutes and then leave some questions since people have been peppering them in anyways. But the next kind of related feature is also really exciting, which is the ability to ask your data questions. So this is based on OpenAI's Code Interpreter product, if folks are familiar with that, which basically works as kind of like a SQL or kind of like a data analyst, where you can give it an Excel sheet of data and then ask questions like, suppose you give them an Excel sheet of car data. You can say, okay, how many of these, can you create me a chart with all of the different cars broken down by their type? So you have, like Acura, Toyota, so forth and so on. And the reason why we think this is so exciting is because right now, like dashboarding and data analysis and understanding data is really difficult to do. Not only like understanding what the data means, but then being able to work with it, being able to create charts, exporting it, having dashboards available for you in your system that are that are quick to create, because you don't just want static dashboards, you kind of want to be dynamic with your data. And so what we've built is something that allows you to basically upload a CSV file and then just ask questions in natural language and chat with our solution. So you can say, can you share any interesting trends that you see in the data? What types of transactions are my customers making each month? Do you have any ideas for why, ACH is spiking in February? Questions like that. You can get graphs. You can also get responses in just Word format. And what we hope this allows customers to do is just be a little bit more dynamic with their data, get answers quickly, not have to rely on data analysts on their team or on our team to understand, productivity of different analysts, how quickly alerts are being closed, what types of transactions are being made, what your return rates look like, so forth and so on. Like that should be really easy to do. And that's the direction we're moving in here, because again, if I think about historically, what has the data analysis world look like? It's things like Power BI, like Excel, of course. And that requires a lot of expertise, even to learn how to build, a good Power BI dashboard or to use Excel really well. And it also just requires a lot of work. You have to export the data, then you have to format it, then you have to maybe clean it up, then you have to create a chart. We're really trying to just cut that all out. So you have a question, you have your data, you're able to get answers to your questions. So with that, I can go into the demo. The first demo is just on the AI Copilot as it stands right now. So I know we've been talking a lot about kind of future state AI agents serving as L1, defense mechanisms. But to start, we're at level 1 right now, which is just pointing out on an alert what might be interesting for an analyst to look at. So here, if I open up this first alert and I go to the alert page, I'll see this little AI Copilot risk assessment here, where you see the alert score, the suggested disposition, and then the top reasons for why. So here, the AI Copilot says, okay, there's been a lot of different IP addresses across events for this person. There's also different countries associated with all of the events for this person. And the oldest email address was only created 5 minutes before the most recent flag transaction. This is all pretty risky based on historically what I've seen on alerts. So I think this is pretty high risk and it's a true positive. You can also see this new feature that we're working on called AI investigation. I won't touch on this too much, but what this basically allows you to do is have a checklist of items that you want the AI Copilot to do and then give you the response of. So the types of items that our customers care about are run an internet search on this person and tell me if they're an actual person, if you can find anything about them on LinkedIn, LinkedIn, Facebook, etc., that corroborates what is on their entity profile in my program. If it doesn't, flag that. Or if it's a business, run the business on opencorporates.com. Tell me if it's if the business is in good standing. Another thing can be just check how long ago the customer registered. If they registered more than if they registered within the past year, just flag that to me. So there could be a couple of different simple checklist items that you can create for the AI Copilot, and then they'll be able to do an AI investigation and then give you the responses. So this is kind of you seeing us move from maybe level 1 to level 2 of the AI Copilot, with the end goal being something that can just take a look at an alert, work it, especially if it's a false positive, or escalate it if it doesn't seem like a false positive. We have something similar for false positives. I see we're getting really low on time, so I'm going to just open it up maybe. This one is the same thing, but false positive, color's a little bit different reasons. For things like this, especially for compliance teams, our next step is actually not the AI investigation. Instead, it's something more like automatically generating a narrative so that you don't have to worry about that, because the next thing to do is, generate a narrative, make sure that's written in the format you usually write your narratives, close it out. We want to make sure that's really easy for our customers. But with that, I'll move on to our last thing, which is Ask Unit21. AI, I think we're changing this name to Ask Your Data. So we should change that here as well. But what you can do is first export any data that you have in Unit21 for now. So that can be, alerts, transactions, cases, rules, rule validations, so forth and so on. Then once you have that downloaded, you see this new button called Ask Questions About This File Export Using AI. So I can open this up. It'll create a new session for me, and I'll also save the previous sessions if I want to see what was asked before. And it'll give me a couple of out-of-the-box questions that I can ask. So, tell me if there are any notable patterns or trends. Tell me any outliers or anomalies. Can you extract any valuable insights from a data set? Can you help me understand transaction patterns of different users or geographic groups? So I'll choose the first one. And because this is generative AI, that means it's non-deterministic, which means every time you ask questions, you might get a slightly different response. So that's just something I think it's very cool and interesting, because you'll get maybe the different responses in the same data set. It should still all make sense, but that's just something that we make sure customers are aware of. Because if you try to, show this to a regulator, for example, and you run the same query twice, the responses will be different. So that's why you want, historically, what did the responses look like? Maybe you want to generate a couple of different responses, maybe 3 times, and make sure that they all align. But here we're generating a response. I think this is taking a little bit of time. So while that's happening, any questions, Scott, that we should take a look at in these last couple of minutes?
Absolutely, Ria. Give you some time to sip some of your coffee. Take a breath. Take a breath. We hit our word count at Unit21, so Ria has picked up all the word count. So one of the questions we have in the queue is, how do we protect our data using OpenAI tools?
Yeah, great question. So this is a question that comes up pretty often with all of our customers, as I'm sure you can imagine. So there are a couple of things that we do. We use OpenAI's enterprise feature, which makes sure that all of the data that's sent to OpenAI and all of the output that comes back from OpenAI is owned by our customer, not owned by OpenAI. In addition, none of that data is used to train any OpenAI models. So the reason why OpenAI's enterprise functionality even came about is because companies like Microsoft wanted to make sure that it was available and something that their customers could use. So they needed to make sure there was kind of like an enterprise safe version of OpenAI that's usable. So the data that goes to them, the data that comes back to them is our customers' data. It's segregated from other customers' data. So if we have,
so
3 or 4 customers,
it's my data using that. It's back and forth. It's not going to credit union A or financial institution B. It's mine to mine.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's always owned by you, and it's not shared. It's not mixed with other customers' data, and it's also not used by OpenAI to train any of their models, and it's not used by us to train any of our models unless we get approval from the customer.
Got it. And then the other question is about documentation regulators. Everything inside Unit21 has an audit trail, and all audit trails are exportable, so you can export all data. And then we have another question regarding reporting. And yes, Unit21 comes out of the box with a slew of reporting, and you can even customize that reporting as you see fit to. So if you do want to see alert to cases metrics, you can have that. Cases to SARS, all that is built into the system. All right.
Awesome.
Keep on.
Thanks, Scott.
We're finishing up. We're finished strong, Ria.
Okay, great. So I tested this out earlier this morning and got a better response. So I'm going to show you that response because, like I said, it's not deterministic. The most recent response I got was not super sensical, but I ran this question. Tell me if there are any notable patterns or trends that emerge from this data. Earlier this morning, 6 my time, 8 for everybody on this call. And as you can see, the AI agent tells me, or the response tells me the CSV file, what information it has, the different columns, how it's going to notify any notable patterns or trends. It'll create a graph for me, and it'll tell me some interesting patterns or trends. So we can see, certain periods have more alerts created. Most of the alerts have a status of open. Let's see, amount volume. There's a wide range of how many of the amount in each transaction, with a very large mean, even though that mean is really influenced by very large transaction volumes. There's also a large number of transactions per alert, or no, there's a small number of transactions per alert, less than 1, with a certain standard deviation. So what these patterns suggest is that the vast majority of alerts are still in open status and actually do not involve transactions. Maybe they involve just entities and like entity information like registration date, or maybe they involve actions. The amount, volume, and number of transactions are frequently 0. So it's possible that a lot of these alerts are precautionary or false positives. For us, we're in Unit21's environment, so they're just fake alerts. We're probably just testing out generation of alerts, not actual transactions or actions being caught. But when transactions do occur, they can sometimes be of high volume. So semi-interesting. Obviously, this is on fake data, on Unit21 data. It would be a lot more interesting on customer data. So maybe we should do that for the next presentation, Scott. That's on me. With that, I know we're right at time. Wanted to see if there was any last 1 to 2 questions that would be helpful for us to touch on.
I don't see any other questions, Ria. So I think with that being said, from Unit 21's perspective, we do thank everybody for allowing us to take the time for Ria and I to chat with you. And then we'll hand it over to Danny, and that's it.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much. For anyone attending the webinar, if you have any additional questions, you want to reach out to myself or anyone on the Unit 21 team, please do. We're always happy to talk about Unit 21, talk about fraud, money laundering, all those fun things. The recording of the webinar will be available. A link will be, I think, sent out. Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but again, appreciate everyone's attendance today and hope you all have a good day. Thanks.